Right, I've started recording.
Okay. May I go for it?
You may.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome, everyone. It's very good to see you all. Familiar names and some new names, you're all very welcome. My name is Rachel. I'm joined tonight by Natalie, B and Rebecca. B and Rebecca are mother and daughter, in case that comes up in conversation and you're with us for the first time. So we're very pleased to welcome you here tonight for our conversation around the revolution of self-care. The four of us have been really looking into this subject much more deeply, I'd say, in probably since I fell down one stair on the Boxing Day morning on my way to do some yoga before the children woke up in my home. And I did severe cartilage and ligament soft tissue damage and was unable to walk for about 2 weeks. And at which point I shared this news with my three friends here, and nobody was surprised. And also we all realized how important it is, and it was then and is now and still is, to rest. And that's what prompted a number of conversations that have really taken place in the last month or two. We wanted to come here tonight to kind of share what we're seeing about self-care, how we're starting to see things differently, but also to absolutely acknowledge that the four of us are finding it incredibly difficult, that every day we have a WhatsApp group and we leave each other voice notes every day. We're seeing things differently, we're discovering new things. And as a four, I'd say we're pretty bad so far at resting and taking care of ourselves properly. So we wanted to talk about quite a few of the things we've been uncovering in the last 6 weeks in particular. This evening, I guess, or wherever you are in your day, it's going to be probably a bit more reflective than our usual sessions. We have a lot of questions about our own behaviour, questions about how we're looking after ourselves. And I can already hear, resistance across the group, all of us here just going, well, I have no time to do any of that. So tonight's chat is really not about, how great will my bubble bath be, or what type of herbal tea do I need to buy, or is walking the dog once a day enough? It's really not about what does self-care look like and how can I do a bit more of it. It's more to do with a lot of the things we're uncovering, actually, and some of those things are to do with what we expect from ourselves, and how we're currently choosing to look after ourselves, nourish ourselves, and why in some cases, and often typically, that is so difficult. As a four, I'd also say that, again, we can only talk from our experience. And we're all coaches, so we work across sector. We work with every different type of person, with every different type of background. So we're hearing and noticing themes across all of those conversations. But our intention tonight is really to show, talk and learn with each other, from each other, and with you as well. But mostly to go, can we all help one another to start to look in more of a direction of, let's put ourselves first a little bit more, or let's really think about self-care and what it actually should and could mean, rather than what it has meant so far, which is, for me anyway, a bit of a, oh, I feel a bit emotional, or oh, I feel a bit tired. Shut up, Rach, you just need an early night. There's so much more going on than that. So we're going to kind of share where we are with these things. I'd really like to start with two things that stuck out for me very recently, which prompted me to start questioning what I'm doing and how I'm living. The first was, wonderful B on the call has recently had an addition to the family of her new puppy, Monty. And the four of us catch up on a really regular basis, and we were having our weekly chats. And B was talking about how, she's not sleeping very well, obviously new puppy, but she said something like, for the first, now we've had the puppy in our house for a couple of weeks, I'm just starting to understand the different types of noises he makes and what he needs when he makes those noises. So as a person, one of the smartest women I know in the world, she spent 2 weeks, there's no judgment here, she spent 2 weeks listening to and paying attention to every single noise that her puppies made, and then sitting back and going, what does that noise mean? And what care do I need to give as a result of that noise? What attention do I need to give as a result of that noise? And I thought, holy crap. When was the last time, Rachel, that you paid attention to your noises and what they meant? And why are we so willing? And I love puppies, dogs, animals, people, everything. Like, why are we so willing? Why is it so easy for us to do something like that, to commit that level of attention to something that we love so much and pay attention to that? And yet, whenever I feel any which way on the range of I feel great right down to I feel rock bottom and flat, I don't pay attention to the nuance of any of that. I don't behave towards myself in any type of different way to compensate for the noise that I'm making. And I've never thought about the range of noises I make and therefore what I need. Often and typically I will just wake up one morning, I will be flat, and I'll just kind of internally berate myself, like, oh, you just need an early night. Or, you know, it's harder for other people, get over it. Or there won't be a lot of compassion or certainly curiosity about what I might need today compared to another day. So that was the first thing that struck me. Why? I'm not suggesting that we all need to become puppies and do any of that stuff, but it's why are we able to do that? And yet I don't know what some of my noises mean, and I've not really paid attention to them. And then the second thing I noticed, which was with the fall down one stair, is that, you know, the three women on this call just said to me, well, now you must take rest. And I was very willing to take that rest because I needed to rest in order to recover. And that got me thinking as well. It's like the only time, pretty much the only time I rest, properly rest, switch off, say no, turn things down, have strict boundaries, don't cross those boundaries, is when I am unable to move, or I am at the most rock bottom place and I am unable, you know, I have to do that, otherwise I won't recover. And it got me thinking, why am I only ever building rest into my life to recover from the busy periods, to recover from the injury, to recover from the stressful time? Why am I not questioning the stressful time itself? Why am I not questioning the busy week that I need to recover from? Why am I only building time into my life to support myself? Because I know I'll be knackered at that point, because I know I will have reached a limit at that point. And so I'm full of questions. And I'm joined by my wonderful friends here who are also probably full of questions. And it's like, what will it take? You know, what will it take for us to start to go, maybe there's something in taking some time to rest properly without reason. Ladies.
Thank you, Rach. And yeah, I think we're all full of questions, aren't we? And you know, we're not the experts here. I want you to know that we are feeling like everybody's probably feeling right now. But you know, we're still 4 months away. Well, certainly in England, from being fully released from this lockdown. And I think it's just been building up and building up and building up and building up for so many of us, and we are running on empty. I know I am, and I know that the other three are, and this feels such an important hour to be sharing with you all tonight. And we don't have all the answers, all right? We're as full of questions as you, but what we hope is that we'll sow some seeds as well for you. And one of the first questions I'd like to put out there is not just for you to hold in your mind. We're going to open the chat about halfway through. But what's the first thing that comes to mind? This is what I'd like you to consider. What's the first thing that comes to mind, either as thought or feeling, when you think of the word self-care? And we've all got our own here, but and we'll share that once we've opened the chat. And you know, just jot it down or keep it in your head, or and you know, if it's when we open the chat you want to share, then that would be great, and we can have a conversation about that. But it just feels kind of important that we know what we're up against in our own minds, actually, when we think of what's that, you know, the meaning of self-care. And I think for me, one of the things that's really important is that, and I've shared this so many times with the work that I do with those with eating disorders, but even, I mean, work with the women in midlife that I work with as well, is that this idea of us running on empty, that when we sit on a plane, and you've probably heard me say this before, but I'd love you to really listen to this. When we sit on a plane before we take off, it's been a long time since we did that, but we are told, we're run through the whole procedure, and then we're told that if there's a drop in cabin pressure, that oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling, and we are told to put our own on before we help anybody else with theirs. All right, we need to do that, because if we don't, then we'll die because we won't have any oxygen. All right, but we don't do that in life. All right, and this is something that is so important, and yet we dismiss it. We dismiss it all the time. I feel really emotional this evening, but we dismiss it all the time. And why is that? You know, why is that? Is it that we've, you know, we love our books, you know that, and this is one of our favorite books at the moment, called Burnout. In fact, we'll share that in the chat later. And they talk about human giver syndrome. And it's not exclusively women, but it's mainly women that are the human givers. And we give without even thinking about it. And yet to give to ourselves feels, I know certainly for me, it feels a real struggle. It feels a real struggle. There's some, and whether that's in upbringing or society, I mean, it's everything that points to us giving. Wednesdays, I take as my day of self-nourishment. I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I take Wednesday as this day. And I have had to fight myself to allow myself to do that. And that's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And I still have issues, and I still have, you know, B, you can probably join me on this, but last week, I usually do something creative because I love that side, and those of you that know me know that. But last week, I was really feeling quite low, and B said to me, why don't you just watch your box set? Why don't you just stick the telly on? And I was horrified because I couldn't do that. I can't put the television on in the middle of the day. And it was a real, I mean, we were laughing about it, kind of me between gritted teeth, I have to say. And then I was thinking, where did that come from? That I can't do that. And then I was thinking, my sister will laugh at this, that yes, Saturday afternoons in the winter when there's rugby on, yeah, that's fine. You can watch TV in the afternoon then. But the thought of sitting down to watch something on the TV during the day is a waste of my day, a waste of my time. All right. It's bonkers. It's bonkers.
It's this idea, and in burnout, they talk about it a lot. And Natalie, you raised it in our group the other day about this idea of productivity and how so much value is put on being productive. It's like our value comes from what our outputs are. Like no matter what that is. So if it's your Wednesdays, it's like, okay, well, I need to sew myself a new outfit by 5 o'clock, otherwise today hasn't been a successful rest day, but it still has to be productive. But actually, again, they talk about this in burnout, about we're not put on this planet to be productive, but we're caught in this this cycle, and busyness in our society is rewarded. And it's like we've got to the stage where burnout almost becomes a badge of honor, because it's like, oh, I've worked myself into the ground, and that's totally acceptable, and it kind of is rewarded. And it's like when you ask someone how they're doing and they say, oh, really, really busy. It's like, firstly, that's not actually answering the question. but that just seems to be, and I'd say pretty well, I guess it's pre-COVID and now, because I feel like people are, particularly with homeschooling and everything that's going on with the pandemic, I think that's still the answer that you get. But yeah, it feels like if you're not busy or if you're not productive, then what are you doing? And it's, I don't know, I feel like we've just got into this cycle where we don't know, we can't like see a way out, because it's like it's like a self-fulfilling thing, and we're all keeping it alive by continuing to believe it and act on it, and staying on that kind of hamster wheel, and keep responding with those autopilot responses without even thinking about where all of these beliefs actually come from in the first place. But I think that's, I don't know, I think we need to break the cycle.
Yeah, I really feel that. And when you were talking there, I could almost feel it inside myself, like, wow, why is it like this? And why are we not seeing it clearer? And there's just so much to unpick here. And this cycle that we continue to stay in innocently, because we've just got so many habits of it, and there's so many almost unwritten rules about it, or things that we've made up about it, and also innocently passing it on to the next generation as we pride the busyness and fill the timetables of our kids as well. And it's really hard sometimes to zoom out and see what's happening, and where is it in the mix that the self-care somehow became a luxury. Like, I don't really understand why that would be, and especially goes against everything that Rebecca's just said there about the priority of looking after yourselves, so that you can help others, so you can be of service to others. So there's that element that actually this is vital, this nourishment. It's certainly not luxurious, and I'm like, hands up, I'm learning all the time, because I previously might have said bubble bath to the first question, and don't get me wrong, bubble bath still on my best list things to help me calm down. But yeah, there's this idea that it's not a luxury, it's not selfish, it's critical. There's also this idea of rest to recover that Rachel touched on, and Bea touched on there, with this sort of cyclical thing. Like, so we need to almost earn the rest, or we wait for something awful to happen to actually take it. And then, God forbid, we rest. I mean proper rest, not just sleep, which we should hopefully be doing anyway, but like really allow ourselves to kind of have some peace and resting in not doing, being human beings. Rest without conditions. Like, what does that look like? And I'm not sure I know, because I rest in order to be more effective the next day, or to cope with what I need to do. Like, what? I really feel that there's something to see there that I haven't fully seen. And there's a huge thing about permission. Do we give ourselves permission?
And it's,
Go on.
sorry, Natalie, I was going to say, it's like, when will we see how important we are in our own lives? That we're not a supporting actor in our life. We are the star in our own life. And yet we give and give and give, and we take more caffeine if we're feeling exhausted. We numb with wine or chocolate or sugar or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with any of those, but it's, why are we doing it? Where rest is what we need. And this, you know, I'm becoming more and more interested in this word instead of self-care, which has just become, well, I showed the girls, ladies, earlier, when I wrote self-care in them to WhatsApp, it offers you emojis. And it was a haircut, a bubble bath, and massage. All right. So when I look at self-nourishment, that's just what, you know, what are we doing to nourish our bodies, our minds, and our souls? That I think is where we should be looking. All right. And yes, sorry, I was just going to add in there that it's like, and I can hear, you know, people saying, or, you know, me, I'd be saying it as well. Yeah, but have you seen my to-do list? But it's like, what will it take? What will it take for us to prioritize our own nourishment?
I was just going to say that, like, the other day, Rachel kind of dropped this bomb into our WhatsApp chat, which was about, what if that becomes a default? Like, imagine getting to a place where we're not even having this conversation. Like, there isn't even a name for this self-care thing, because it's just how we live. Like, can you imagine just, and this is what Rachel, please feel free to chip in, but what if it's completely flipped around the other way, that is the default, that's just how we are, and then everything else is extra? It's like we build this solid foundation where we're whole, we're charged, we're rested, we're nourished, we're all of those things to the brim. It's not just kind of charging your phone to 10% so it'll last you until you get back from the shops. I'm very guilty of that, but I think that's what we do with ourselves as well. It's like, I'll just rest enough in order to, again, it's the conditions, in order to get through this workshop I have to run, or in order to whatever it might be. So, like, what does that look like when we then have that kind of solid base, that foundation, and then we can add from there, rather than trying to find 5 minutes here and there to try and squeeze it in?
Oh, I love that, Bea. It was like we talked about the other day, and we were laughing at me, because I think I have two children, 8 and 5, and I think the TV had gone on, and I knew I had a good 10 minutes, no questions. So I kind of run upstairs, lie on my bed, close my eyes, and I'm like, yes, 10 minutes apiece. And it's like, I believe somewhere in my system, I just think that is definitely going to sustain me through the next 48 hours at least. I mean, I'm pure, you know, what if we are exactly as Bea's saying, and this was the conversation, we're overflowing 24/7, and then we pop out of this state to do a little bit of the busyness, which is the life, which is the work stuff, and then part of me just argues with you immediately, and just, that's impossible. Like, look at all the stuff we have to do. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it's easy to clear out, to cut back, to strip back, to say no, to inconvenience others. And this is one of the conversations that's fallen out of everything we've talked about. When I say no to you, I absolutely 100% believe that I am an inconvenience to you. But if I don't say no to you, then I'm never going to say yes to myself. And it's kind of where do I draw the line? So there are responsibilities that we can't walk away from. You will all have your own set of stuff that, you know, my oversimplifying of this, of, oh, just say no and it'll be fine. Just say no and you'll have more headspace. I totally hear what I'm saying, and I know how unrealistic that sounds on many levels. But what I haven't done is question why I'm so busy in the first place, or what I'm so busy doing. So in the last 4 weeks in particular, I promise you my house is a much bigger mess than it's ever been before, because I'm paying less attention to the smaller things, like where can I start to pull myself away from what I'm expecting myself to achieve. And some of these things might be very small examples. Some of it might be, you know, a friend of mine calls and they want me to have a conversation with their friend. I'm not in a position right now to say yes to all of those things, but maybe I can say no and defer, or maybe I just need to say no altogether right now. Can your friend call me again in 6 months? Or just no. Like right now, my plate is full. And until I'm able to just be in this full place where I don't have so many things on that to-do list, I just want to burn the to-do list. It's like, what's on there and what nourishment do I get from those things? And as far as my responsibilities that I absolutely have to fulfill go, I will do those things. But everything else, what's happening at the moment, and I know I sound quite, you know, a bit ballsy about this, but everything else on that list I really want to look at. I really want to just take a look and go, what am I doing those things for? And where's the nourishment in any of them? And if there is no thing attached to that action or that, you know, piece of work on my to-do list, I really need to question what on earth it's on my list for. Because some of this stuff is unsustainable. Just saying yes because the default setting for so long has been, yes, let me help you with whatever you're asking me for. I kind of want to flip that and just see what no default feels like a bit, or somewhere in the middle, but just not this level of yesness. I hope some of that made sense.
And what comes to mind as well when you're saying that is because and I was talking with a friend, and she was saying the difference for her in working from home than in the office is that she is now freer to take those smaller chunks of time. And we've been working together, so coaching, and it's just that ability to say, I'm full right now, I need to go out for a walk. And knowing that actually when she gives herself that time, she's more likely to come up with a solution to the problem that she's been just mulling over and sat at her desk, unable to find the solution. But actually giving herself permission to step away from her desk, to go for a walk, to say no to things, has been liberating. Because when we settle down, when we move away from all of the noise that comes from our to-do lists and the constant, you know, I'm exhausted, and I've still got all of this to do, just means that we get that chance to settle, and then things seem less urgent maybe, or we see a clarity in what needs to be done next, but we tend not to give ourselves that time. So I think it's so important on so many levels. This just, you know, it's like, I remember when I was doing my coach training, and it was when B was ill. So I remember going in, and I'm sure I might have shared this on one of our calls before, but going in, and one of the guys who was supporting our teacher, he caught sight of me, and I was in a bit of a mess, crying and everything because of what was going on at home. And he just sat me down and he said, "What do you need right now?" And I was flippant and I said, "A tissue." So he got me a tissue. And then he said, "And what do you need right now?" And again, I was not, my mind wasn't in what he was trying to say to me. And I just said, "Well, a coffee." So he got me a cup of coffee. And then he said, "And what do you need right now?" And I just burst into tears. And it's like, it was as simple as that. is to, you know, even in that taking a breath, what do I need right now? Not what do they need, what do I need right now? And moving away from that's selfish, because that's the oxygen.
It's just so true, and so because I don't think we're not asking ourselves these questions. We're not asking ourselves what we need. We're not listening very much to the feedback that our body's giving us, because it always is kind of trying to voice an opinion, to tune into what we need. To where we started the call, and Rachel talked about like trying to tune into Monty and Monty's cries, and actually, but yeah, what do we need? Because I think when we do look inward and we ask ourselves those questions, we tend to get an answer. But what we don't do is we don't pause for a start. And in the urgency of the to-do list, everything looks so urgent, and we look outside of ourselves at all the things to do. And one thing I wanted to share is that, and you know, I've got an 8-year-old that we're supporting to do the home learning and do our jobs. So like many families at the moment, it's a huge juggle. We're all in the house, no space, you know, so it's you know, it's extreme times. And something that we've talked about in our conversations is we're comparing our capacity now to a life when we weren't in a pandemic. You know, so that for a start needs totally questioning. Why would our capacity now be anything like that, especially given that we're being asked to do the impossible every day? Our expectations of what we believe we can achieve are way off. So we set ourselves up to fail by expecting we can do a certain amount in a day. You know, and in terms of feedback from our bodies, well, in late January, I had cold sores all over my mouth and mouth ulcers inside my mouth. You know, my body was crying out that it was run down and needed some nourishment and needed me to pause. And it kind of took that for me to start listening. And we were already having our conversation in our WhatsApp and our conversations when we talk. And then, but I think, you know, I then had a fall.
Can you tell us about the fall? Because
so I won't go into too much depth because I'm mindful of time, but I was multitasking. See, what happens with me and the to-do list is I just get into hyperactive mode and I'm multitasking to the extreme, and I lose sight of doing the thing I need to do next. So I'm coming downstairs to swap shifts with my husband so he can use the office and I can take over the home learning. I have an open laptop, a phone, and a mug of tomato soup. I, instead of putting something down, step over a stair gate we have that leads into the kitchen, foot catches, and I fall forward and land on my head, egghead, and 2 very bruised knees. Fortunately, it wasn't blood that my husband imagined it was tomato soup. But it's these wake-up calls. So that was like Rachel's fall back on Boxing Day, you know, it's these extremes that happen. And then I rested. But my body was telling me long before that something needed to change. I just wasn't listening well enough. You know, I was getting the signs and signals. So what I wanted to say, just to bring it back to a practical kind of what can be done, and you know, I'm on page 1 with this, but Bea asked a fabulous question in one of our chats a while ago, is like, well, so what could we do to kind of bake self-care into what we do? So we do have our to-do list, and we do have the things that we need to get done, and we do have jobs to do and children to feed, etc. So in those things, if they're things we can't say no to or don't have the luxury to, what could it look like to do those things in a way that nourishes ourselves more? And I've been experimenting with this, and I think there's something worth us kind of looking at that, because I know that I can do an activity, and if I focus on one activity and try and not have my mind on the other things I need to do, and just one thing at a time, I do feel, and I'm able to navigate that easier, and it feels less exhausting. It doesn't feel like self-care, but it feels a lot more like in line with it. And also, I'm just watching my multitasking, because what I was doing is I was like eating breakfast and at the same time printing stuff out or having a lovely drink, and you know, and it's just everything was a multitask. The more I could multitask, it was, you know, and that's just not the measure of success when it comes to anything really, but certainly not when it comes to this. So on a really practical, I love Bee's question, and I need to ponder on it a lot more.
Yeah.
What would it look like if we baked self-care into it all? But and so what does that mean for you? And for me, it certainly looked like breathing, one thing at a time.
I have opened the chat. I'm just to say I've opened the chat, so feel free to ask questions, comment, share, or not at all.
It is an interesting question, and it's one that I haven't quite figured out yet, because I think it's so different to the way we live at the moment. I think when we haven't stopped to look at kind of the lay of the land and actually considered these kind of things before, it can feel really, really weird and really uncomfortable to do that. And I think just picking up on something that Rachel said earlier, it's like, well, if we're going to look at what are we actually busy with, then actually one of the things that comes to mind for me in terms of how I can start to bake it in is choosing and going with what feels warm and not overriding that.
Yeah.
And that will involve saying no, which is really, really uncomfortable, because I don't really like saying no, and I feel like I haven't taught myself to say no. So much so that, and this kind of goes back to the point about inconveniencing other people, I'm having surgery next week, and I've been told I'll likely have a 2-week recovery period. However, even following conversations with these three and one of my very best friends, who have all told me, well, yes, you've got 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks sick leave. You're being signed off by the doctor for 2 weeks. That means you must rest. That means you must not do any work. And yet, even following those conversations, I have sat and typed emails responding to clients saying, I can book you in for all of these different times in my second week of post-surgery. Completely consciously done. And even while I was doing it, I could hear all of the ladies in my head saying, what the hell are you doing? And yet I pressed send multiple times. So, which just led me to think, why? Like, what is it? What is this deep-rooted belief that is making me do that completely consciously? And I think becoming conscious that we're doing this stuff is kind of, I guess, one of the first steps, because we can't do anything about the stuff that we can't see. But, and this goes right back to the beginning, Rachel's point that we really are not experts at this, because I completely failed at doing that whilst being completely conscious that I was doing it. And even while I was doing it, I was really not okay with the fact that I was doing it. So it's like, how do we get out of that when it's so, the roots are so deep that of this belief, and I don't even know what that belief is. Maybe it's that we just, I just fundamentally don't believe that I come first in the order of who I should care for first. But it's, I don't know, I feel kind of, like you can probably tell, I feel a bit kind of flummoxed by that, because just seeing that as a very live example kind of really hits home, because it's like, oh my God, we've been doing this forever and there is still such a long way to go. And I'm interested to see what people say in response to the first question that was asked about what comes to mind when you hear self-care, because one of the questions that occurred to me this morning was, as I was thinking of my response to that question, was what would my answer be to the question of what comes to mind when you think of how you care for others? So swapping out self-care for caring for others. And it just completely floored me, because like my answers are just so wildly different, that the way I care for others is completely different to the way I care for myself, and how I prioritize my self-nourishment care, whatever we want to call it. So yeah, as you can tell, I feel very kind of tangled up in this mess of what the hell is going on and how the hell do we get out of it. So yeah, I certainly am processing a lot of these questions. Yeah, so I'm interested to see what others share as well. We've got some questions coming through.
Yeah, let's jump. I love that, Bea. I also think what you're saying again is with your conscious decision to do that and your struggle against doing that. You know, it's like what Rebecca said earlier, we're not even featuring in our own life. It's like, how can I make all of this stuff work so that everything around me, everyone around me has what they need? And Kristen's here in the chat saying, you know, she might make a list of the things that she needs. What do I need right now? She's got this idea that if she makes that list, she can recognize what she needs more easily. And I just think we're just not used to thinking about what we need right now and our own needs in any given situation. It's like, I'll do these things and I'll provide these things, and then I'll focus on me later. And lovely point by Lynn, you know, I'm wondering if sometimes we have this idea that if we're not doing, then we're somehow not being, and the need to process that more. That's another question. I do this, you know, there's a lot of clients that I work with who want to build in more time within their day, for example, to do a bit more strategic thinking about their position or the team or where everybody's well-being. They just want some quiet time within their day, but to force themselves to move away from this idea of being busy, having an output, being productive, being efficient and effective, they can't do it. So we often sit together, and I think that's why coaching and why we find the space that we create with clients valuable for clients. It's like coach irrelevant. It's like the person just needs some time and space. And I think there's that part of it as well. Why can't we just sit still occasionally?
Adding to what Kristen said, I think that question is so powerful. What do I need right now? Because it brings us into the present moment. All right. And in this present moment, I've got everything I need. You know, we're if you think about our days, or like you guys homeschooling as well, it's like by 8 o'clock in the morning, or probably earlier than that, you're already kind of imagining how the day is going to look. And we suffer twice then, don't we? In the future thinking of it, and then as we're going through it, because it becomes so heavy. And I just love what you said, Rach, about trying to have a different relationship with it, or Natalie, a different relationship with the tasks that we're doing as well.
I think it also means that this idea, and I have a real problem with the word self-care. I know we've kind of touched on that, but even when I say it, I'm like, that's not what I mean, because when I think of self-care, it's a very kind of commercialized view of expensive bath sets and things like that. But when we're thinking of what that looks like in each moment and asking that question, what do I need in this moment, it means that it's going to be different from moment to moment. Yeah. So it's not like we just kind of whip out the self-care kit, slap on a face mask and we're done. It's going to look different in every moment. So kind of tuning into that. So it's not just a sticking plaster for any kind of, like Rachel was saying, any kind of noise we're making. It's actually really tuning in and listening. What is it exactly that I need right now? Because it might be something very, very specific. And yet we have this kind of one size fits all fix for it, whatever that might be, whether it's drinking a bottle of wine or sitting in the bath or going for a walk or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that the word self-care, like I'd love there to us to reinvent almost another word. It just doesn't seem to get to the crux of what we're talking about here, because it feels like it's somehow this luxury, and I think what we're discovering is it's just far from that.
And for me, when I think of, sorry, I was just going to say, when I think of self-care, you know, that, like that question we asked at the beginning, and having spoken with others, it's like they feel guilt. Guilt. Like I shouldn't have to take time, you know? And I think as well as, you know, for women, and I count ourselves in this, that are perceived to be strong and have it all sorted, which we don't. We're absolutely don't, but it can feel really hard to ask for help, to actually say I'm struggling, because as Rachel said at the beginning about, we don't like to be inconvenient. And I think Rach was planning having a t-shirt made with I'm inconvenient.
There's some amazing questions coming up. I just following on from that point, and I'm purposefully skipping a few, but I'm sure we can go back. Stevie said, what about time off? Christine said, maybe we need the words love of self. Yeah. I like that, but you know, do we feel guilt because we don't see others doing their self-care, so we think others don't need it? I wonder whether that is part of the cycle. Because when we do it, we give permission to others, and when we don't, we kind of make out that we got it all sorted, and we haven't. Lovely. I've clearly skipped some, but I think there's definitely something in this. We're wanting to be convenient, and it feels not.
Sorry, I was just picking up on Kristen's point, saying self-care is necessary maintenance, like the car's oil change, rather than putting a new air freshener from the mirror.
Love it.
Yeah.
It is so true. This is, it sounds really horrible, this is maintenance. but yeah, it is.
And I love Mark's point here about, you know, why should we be able to do more when we're going through this really extraordinary period of time, and why is that expectation there? And we touched on in a couple of other talks, you know, about getting your post-COVID body ready, and, you know, because you've had time at home and because you are not commuting, or you have apparently this free time, what are you going to do with it and all that? Not only are we expecting possibly too much of ourselves altogether, but I have more questions for all of us about, you know, the busyness. And I'd love to be in conversations over the next few weeks and months where, you know, for a long time it's been, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, nothing, because there's nothing we can do. But actually, I'd love that. I'd love to, once all of this situation is over. What are you doing this weekend? Nothing, we're resting. You know, and this idea of being busy and making plans and planning holidays, and I'm so grateful that that might be on the cards again, but there's also something very much to be said. What about weekends at home? And I know we've had loads, but or just the walk to the park. It doesn't all have to cost and be this activity and this event that, you know, it's like a busy off, and who can present that they've done the most over the weekend, and it's exhausting. I think we should be just doing far less on a regular basis.
I love what Emma says here about the more we add to the height of the ladder in which we need to come down from in order to reach self-care, the less likely and harder we think it will be to get there.
Wow.
Wow. That's it, isn't it? We love a good ladder metaphor.
We do. Thank you, Emma.
Emma, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that really describes the feeling.
Yeah, Sophie's point about, I think there's a huge thing about giving ourselves permission. Even with working from home and having flexibility, I still struggle to step away from my desk, take a walk or break when I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed throughout the day, rather than just a proper time like lunch. I literally, that went through my mind today. It's like I'm only allowed to go outside in these hours, and even then, because I haven't got anywhere to go, it probably means that I shouldn't really take my full lunch break, which I'm not paid for anyway. And it's just absolutely nuts, isn't it? But yeah, giving ourselves permission, because it's not like we wouldn't give other people permission.
Yeah.
Oh, it's these double standards again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just wonder where it was on the journey that the busyness became what looked normal, because it's certainly not natural. It's not it's like coming back to we weren't born to be productive, but somewhere through our systems and what we're brought up in and work and what we pride and what's valued, the busyness and the glorification of busy has become almost seemingly normal. And almost the stress ends up seeming normal, and neither are natural. And whatever this self-care looks like, it has to get back to looking to the natural, which is going to be looking towards listening to ourselves. And it's certainly going to be a lot more about being to discover that than doing, I sense.
Kristen's just posted, do we need a better term for doing nothing that doesn't imply recovery? I think it also needs to imply not being idle, because that's a word I have a big issue with. And I think Bea found that in a magazine, didn't you, about being idle, because again, it's kind of, we're not taught idle. Well, I remember being told, it's kind of the work of the devil. Being idle means that there's room for the devil to get in. Gee whiz. So yeah, it can't. Yeah, doing nothing. It's all of these words.
But it's so interesting. It's like, but it's not the word itself. It's just all of these layers and layers and layers of story and meaning that we've added to them. Yeah. We've put so much power into these words that they as soon as we say them, like when I say self-care, I kind of roll my eyes. That's literally my response. And when you think of idleness or doing nothing, it's kind of like, oh, because it's all this conditioning that we've had for decades and decades and decades that we haven't questioned or even noticed. So, but it's just so interesting, our reaction just to these words.
Oh, I love that. Emma's just said self-care should not become another item on the to-do list. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Kristen's talking about she's going to start saying she's steeping. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're so right, Emma, that it shouldn't be another thing on the to-do list. So like going back to my point earlier about, and what Rachel had raised in our group about this becoming the default, so that this is just the way we are as human beings. This is just how we live. This becomes a new normal. So actually it's not something we do, it's who we are and what life just looks like, which I think kind of takes the, I don't know, just thinking about that, it just feels so much lighter,
yeah.
And yet so much kind of sturdier. Rather than, I feel like, and going back to the ladder idea, that it feels like we're climbing up this really steep ladder, holding so much stuff. It's like the laptop, the soup, the to-do list, all of this stuff, trying to get higher and higher, faster and faster to this point somewhere up in the clouds. And yet down below there isn't this, well, it's a ladder that's kind of swaying from side to side, and it's going to topple over, and it does topple over when we get to that point of burnout. So actually, instead of when we fall off, when we reach that point of burnout, yeah, we get a few bumps and bruises and we rest, and then we get the ladder out again. So instead of just going through that cycle of climbing and climbing and climbing and giving and working and being productive, falling, then allowing ourselves to rest just enough that we can then get the ladder out again. How, like, what can it look like instead? What are those solid building blocks that we can build from, that is sustainable and stable? It might not get as high as quickly, but actually then there's no need to rebuild it all the time, because we've got these solid foundations that have got us.
Yeah.
We have got ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think if we come at it from that approach, and I don't know what those building blocks are yet.
Well, it's interesting, Bea, because Kirsty's just said something here about, have we lost the ability to just be quiet with ourselves, quietly kind in how we talk to ourselves, to let ourselves slow down and reflect? And I think that's where we start.
I agree.
And that's in, whatever. And when I talked about nourishment of body, mind and soul, for me, it starts with the soul. And that we find, and this is why nature is so important, getting outside, meditation, whatever, anything that helps your mind settle. Anything that helps your mind settle.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I guess, wiping the slate clean. That's getting the broom out and dusting away the debris that's fallen. And then it's like consciously deciding what those building blocks are going to be, and doing that kind of mindfully. And it's going back to everything we've talked about in this call about what does the day-to-day look like, and making a conscious choice about that from a place of my well-being comes first, always. No excuses, no exceptions. Because I think when we come from that point, I think everything will look and feel very, very different. And the way we show up in the world and what we create in the world is going to look so different when we come from that kind of solid foundation. I'm conscious that we are out of I don't really feel like we need to say anymore. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. As we've said multiple times, you can definitely tell that we have not got this sussed. and we're just kind of scratching the surface with this. But we'd love you just to allow this conversation from this evening just to sink in, and not to go away and pull together an action plan of how you can build a solid foundation and get rid of the ladder and adding more things to the to-do list, but actually just allow yourself to settle and just see what sticks, see what kind of sparks something, and then start to go from there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this evening, and everyone watching back. Anything else from you, ladies?
No,
No,
that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's enjoy some rest.
Yeah.
I'm just going to end the recording now.
Thank you, Becca. Oh, thank you, everyone.